Okay, hello everyone. Welcome. Taking a few minutes to get settled in, to give people time to join. Hey there, Jamie and Guy, Air to Roma. Oh, a little bit of an echo there. Hey there, Peter. Peter, welcome. Hi there, William. Welcome, William. So we'll take about 5 minutes, 5 or so minutes to give people an opportunity to join in before we really get started. Taking those 5 minutes to settle in, maybe to say hello to the community that is gathering here at this moment. And then as we get started, we'll start off with a little bit of meditation. Then we'll get into the reading. So we'll do this meditation in the way of gathering ourselves, calming down, settling, opening ourselves up for the teachings. And then today we will be reading from this book that I came across, Peace is a Simple Step by Ajahn Sumedho, collection of writings. Ajahn Sumedho is an extremely senior Western monastic in the Theravada Thai forest tradition. And so we'll be reading a part of this book on the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So we'll go through that reading, really opening up, receiving this wisdom, and then we'll practice meditation together. I usually put my mic on the mic on my shirt, but maybe it's okay right there. Maybe that sounds just fine. Welcome, Chesh. Everyone is gathering in. Wonderful. It is Sunday. It is the Lord's Day, so it makes sense that we We do some practices to venerate, to connect with Lord Buddha, to connect with the deep wisdom that Buddha represents. And we're going to talk a little bit in this reading about the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and what these really represent, what it means to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Sounds good. Okay, great. Getting started in just another minute or two. We can begin to gather our attention, to bring our focus into this body, this life that we are living right now, this present unfolding experience, rather than our idea of ourselves, our idea of our experience, really beginning to tune into, to connect with the experience that we're having right now. And as we begin, as we get started with this community activity, this gathering of practice, looking at the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, and connecting with the Sangha, the community of practitioners, listening to the sound of the bell. The bell invites us to show up, to step into our lives at this moment. To really open ourselves up to receive these teachings. So for about 2 or 3 minutes, beginning and ending with the sound of the bell, bringing our attention to the body, being with the breath. Deeply breathing in through our nose gathering up, collecting, bringing together our entire lives up until this point. Breathing in our whole life, awareness of reality itself, and as we breathe out, letting go of any expectations, any fixed ideas. Breathing in awareness, breathing out, letting go. With each and every breath, coming more and more into the body, into brightness, attentiveness, and lucidity. Showing up in this way not only for ourselves, but for everyone. The people that are near to us, the people that are far away, those that we like, those that we dislike. Breath by breath, showing up for all beings at this moment. Noticing any pain or discomfort, and instead of trying to get away from it, embracing it, being with it, caring for it. Noticing any boredom or neutrality, stepping into it, boldly and bravely being with neutrality, boredom. And finally, any kind of pleasantness, any pleasure. Simply being aware without attachment. Being with it without desiring more. So welcome everyone. Very thankful, glad for everyone being here today, this Sunday, certainly Sunday here in England. As we look through this reading, this writing by Ajahn Sumedho on the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, recognizing, humbling ourselves that this is a real wisdom teaching. And in that way, listening through practice. Being with our breath, being with our awareness, and opening up the garden to receive this rain of wisdom as facilitated by Ajahn Sumedho here. And in Buddhism, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha are these three jewels. So these ultimate diamonds of the Buddhist path and the Buddhist way are the Buddha, we can see the Buddha behind me, the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, and the Sangha. But not in a religious way. What do these jewels represent? What do they mean? What does it mean to be a Buddhist, to take refuge, to go to the jewels for safety, for development? What does that mean? And that's what we'll be covering in this reading today. So let's go ahead and get started. And I'll just show, this is a picture here of Ajahn Sumedho, one of the most senior Western Thai forest monastics. So very, very high-level teacher. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. When people ask, what do you have to do to become a Buddhist? We say that we take refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. And to take refuge, we recite a formula in the Pali language. Buddham saranam gecchami. I go to the Buddha for refuge. Dhammam saranam gecchami. I go to the Dhamma for refuge. Sangham saranam gecchami. I go to the Sangha for refuge. So this Buddham saranam gecchami, this refuge chanting, you may have heard me chant it before. It's extremely common if you go to any kind of monastery or temple. They usually chant this Pali formula of going for refuge. As we practice more and more and begin to realize the profundity of the Buddhist teachings, it becomes a real joy to take these refuges. And even just reciting them inspires the mind. After many years as a monk, I still like to chant Buddham saranam gecchami. In fact, I like it more than I did at first. Because then it didn't really mean anything to me. I just chanted it because I had to, because it was part of the tradition. Merely taking refuge verbally in the Buddha doesn't mean you take refuge in anything. Buddham saranam gecchami, a parrot could be trained to say. And it would probably be as meaningful to a parrot as it is to many Buddhists. So just saying the words is not a magic formula, but could be as meaningful as a parrot saying it. These words are for reflection, for looking at them and actually investigating what they mean. What refuge means, what Buddha means. When we say, I take refuge in the Buddha, what do we actually mean by that? How can we use it so it is not just a repetition of nonsense syllables, but something that really helps to remind us, gives us direction, and increases our devotion, our dedication to the path of the Buddha? The word Buddha is a lovely word. It means the one who knows. And the first refuge is in Buddha as the personification of wisdom. So Buddha here, taking refuge in the Buddha, not necessarily as an entity, but as a personification of wisdom. Unpersonified wisdom remains too abstract for us. We can't conceive a bodiless, soulless wisdom. So as wisdom always seems to have a personal quality to it, using Buddha as its symbol is very useful. We can use the word Buddha to refer to Gautama, the founder of what is now known as Buddhism, the historical sage who attained parinibbana in India 2,500 years ago, the teacher of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, teachings from which we still benefit today. But when we take refuge in the Buddha, that doesn't mean we take refuge in some historical prophet. We take refuge in that which is wise in the universe, in our minds, that which is not separate from us, but is more real than anything we can conceive with the mind or experience through the senses. So taking refuge in the Buddha here, not taking refuge in a historical prophet. We take refuge in that which is wise in the universe, in our minds, that which is not separate from us, but is more real than anything we can conceive with the mind or experience through the senses. Without any Buddha wisdom in the universe, life for any length of time would be totally impossible. It is the Buddha wisdom that protects. We call it Buddha wisdom. Other people can call it other things if they want. These are just words. We happen to use the words of our tradition. We don't argue about Pali words, Sanskrit words, Hebrew, Greek, Latin, English, or any other words. We just use the term Buddha wisdom as a conventional symbol to help remind us to be wise, to be alert, to be awake. Many forest monks in Thailand use the word Buddho as their meditation object. They first calm the mind by following the inhalations and exhalations using the syllables Buddho, and then begin to contemplate, what is Buddho, the one who knows? What is the knowing? When I used to travel around in northeast Thailand on Tudong, so Tudong is this practice when the monks, we travel with very little, maybe a small backpack, or in some cases only our robe and our bowl, traveling, wandering, living in the forest. And when you're doing that, you can stay at many temples, usually for about 3 days. So Ajahn Sumedho here, retelling of a time when he was on this practice of Tudong. I liked to go and stay at the monastery of Ajahn Phun. Ajahn Phun was a much loved and deeply respected monk, the teacher of the royal family, and he was so popular that he was constantly receiving guests. I would sit by his kuti and hear him give the most amazing Dhamma talks, all on the subject of Buddho. As far as I could see, it was all that he taught. He could make it into a really profound meditation, whether for an illiterate farmer or an elegant, Western-educated Thai aristocrat. The main part of his teaching was not just about mechanically repeating Buddho, but about reflecting and investigating, awakening the mind to really look into the Buddho, the one who knows, to really investigate its beginning, its end, above and below, so that one's whole attention was stuck to it. When one did that, Buddho became something that echoed through the mind. One would investigate it, look at it, examine it before it was said and after it was said, and eventually one would start listening to it and hear beyond the sound until one heard the silence. We can bring a similar approach, certainly, to our mindfulness of breathing, to our breath meditation, to really look into it, to really investigate, to get involved with its beginning, its end, above and below, so that one's whole attention is put into the meditation practice, the breathing practice, whatever your method may be. When one does that, the meditation can become something that echoes through the mind. One would investigate it, look at it, examine it before it was said and after it was said. And eventually one would start listening to it and hear beyond the sound until one heard the silence. A refuge is a place of safety. And so when superstitious people came to my teacher, Ajahn Chah, wanting charmed medallions or little talismans to protect them from bullets, knives, ghosts, and so on, he would say, "Why do you want things like that? The only real protection is taking refuge in the Buddha." So in traditional Theravada Buddhism in Thailand, a very common practice is that the monks will give these medallions, kind of stamped symbols, maybe stamped with a meditation phrase or stamped with an image of the Buddha. And there's this superstitious kind of folk religious idea that these medallions or these gifts from the monk can protect people, can give them good luck, protect them from bullets, snakes, knives, etc. So the teacher of Ajahn Sumedho, whose writing we're reading here, people would come to Ajahn Chah wanting these charmed medallions or little talismans to protect them from ghosts, bullets, knives. And he would say, "Why do you want things like that? The only real protection is taking refuge in the Buddha. Taking refuge in the Buddha is enough. But their faith in Buddha usually wasn't quite as strong as their faith in those silly little medallions." Keeping in mind here that taking refuge in the Buddha is not meant as taking refuge in a historical prophet. It's not meant in accepting, in a similar way, accepting Christ into our heart as some Christians practice with, or accepting Muhammad or something along those lines. Buddha as representing this manifested wisdom, this Buddha mind, this awakening mind, this skillful mind, taking refuge in our innate, skillful wisdom mind. The only real protection is taking refuge in the Buddha. Taking refuge in the Buddha is enough. But their faith in Buddha usually wasn't quite as strong as their faith in those little clay medallions. They wanted something made out of bronze and clay, stamped and blessed. That is what is called taking refuge in bronze and clay. Taking refuge in superstition. Taking refuge in that which is truly unsafe and cannot really help us. I can imagine many of us are familiar with taking refuge or trying to take refuge in things that cannot really help us, such as chocolate, ice cream, a fancy car. Today in modern Britain, we find that generally people are more sophisticated. They don't take refuge in magic charms. They take refuge in things like their bank. But that is still taking refuge in something that offers no safety. Taking refuge in the Buddha, in wisdom, means that we have a place of safety. When there is wisdom, when we act wisely and live wisely, we are truly safe. The conditions around us might change. We cannot guarantee what will happen to the material standard of living, or that our bank will survive the decade. The future remains unknown and mysterious. But in the present, by taking refuge in the Buddha, we have the presence of mind now to reflect on and learn from life as we live it. Maybe we take a moment here just to breathe and let that sink in, this taking refuge in the Buddha. So I'll reread this last part here. Taking refuge in the Buddha, in wisdom, means that we have a place of safety. When there is wisdom, when we act wisely and live wisely, we are truly safe. The conditions around us might change. We can't guarantee what will happen to the material standard of living, or that our bank will survive the decade. The future remains unknown and mysterious. But in the present, by taking refuge in the Buddha, we have the presence of mind now to reflect on and learn from life as we live it. Wisdom doesn't mean having a lot of knowledge about the world. We don't have to go to university and collect information about the world in order to be wise. Wisdom means knowing the nature of conditions as we experience them. Wisdom means knowing the nature of conditions as we experience them, not just being caught up in, reacting to, and absorbing into the conditions of our bodies and minds out of habit, fear, worry, doubt, greed, and so on. Once again, wisdom means knowing the nature of conditions as we experience them, not just being caught up in, reacting to, and absorbing into the conditions of our bodies and minds out of habit, fear, worry, doubt, greed, and so on. It is using Buddha, the one who knows, to observe that these conditions are changing, or our mindfulness of breathing, if that's our method. It is using our method of meditation to observe that these conditions are changing. It is the knowing of that change that we call Buddha, and in which we take refuge. We make no claims that Buddha is me or mine. We don't say, I am Buddha, but rather, I take refuge in Buddha. This is a way of humbly submitting to that wisdom, being aware, being awake. Although, in one sense, taking refuge is something we do all the time, the Pali formula, that way of chanting we use, is a reminder, because we forget. We habitually take refuge in worry, doubt, fear, anger, greed, and so on. The Buddha image is also a reminder. When we bow to it, we don't imagine that it is anything other than an image, a symbol. It is a reflection which makes us a little more aware of Buddha, of our refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. The Buddha image sits in great dignity and calm, not in a trance, but fully alert, with a look of wakefulness and kindness, not caught in the changing conditions around it. The image is made of metal, or in this case, some form of stone. While we have flesh and blood bodies which make things much more difficult for us, but it is still a reminder. Some people become very puritanical about Buddha images, but here in the West, I haven't found them to be a danger. The real idols we believe in and worship and that constantly delude us are our thoughts, views and opinions, our loves and hates, our self-conceit and pride. Western people are often up in arms. People who tend to be atheist, non-religious, or anti-religious. They see the Buddha image, very concerned. Oh, you worshiping the Buddha, you shouldn't be doing that. But this observation here, I think, is very clear. Some people become quite concerned about Buddha images, but here in the West, I haven't found them to be a danger. The real idols we believe in and worship, and that constantly delude us, are our thoughts, views and opinions, our loves and hates, our self-conceit and pride. So this is taking refuge in the Buddha. Taking refuge in this Buddha nature, this Buddha wisdom, this waking up. Would anyone like to share something about this first section here, taking refuge in the Buddha? Anyone have something to share about that? Welcome to share in the live chat. Don't go out of your way to share. Encourage you to continue practicing a deep listening, awareness of your breath, awareness of your meditation, deep listening. But if you do have something to share, maybe a question that's quite direct, now may be a time to ask that. Buddha, taking refuge in Buddha, as in taking refuge in this wisdom nature. And wisdom here means knowing the nature of conditions as we experience them, not just being caught up in, reacting to, and absorbing into the conditions of our bodies and minds out of habit, fear, worry, doubt, greed, and so on. And this Ajahn Sumedho is for Theravada Buddhism, this is one of the highest, even conservative Theravada Buddhist masters and teachers, monk. So this explanation of taking refuge in the Buddha, this is as direct as it gets. Taking refuge in the Buddha as this representation, this manifestation of wisdom. So it looks like we don't have too many questions here. We will continue. We've taken a look here at taking refuge in the Buddha. What does that mean? Not from a religious, puritanical perspective, but taking refuge in our Buddha nature, taking refuge in wisdom, the awareness of our conditions as they unfold, not only being carried away by them, pulled into them, absorbed, and acting out of habit, fear, worry, doubt, and greed, but rather knowing the nature of the conditions as we experience them. So that is taking refuge in the Buddha, the first of the triple gems. The second refuge is in the Dhamma, in ultimate truth or ultimate reality. Dhamma is impersonal. We don't in any way try to personify it or to make it any kind of personal deity. When we chant the verse on Dhamma in Pali, we say it is Sanditiko, Akaliko, Ehipasiko, Upanayiko, Pachitam Vetitabo Vinuhi. As Dhamma has no personal attributes, we can't even say it is good or bad, or anything that has a superlative or comparative quality. It is beyond the dualistic conceptions of mind. So when we describe Dhamma, or give an impression of it, we do so through words such as Sanditiko, which means imminent, here and now. That brings us back into the present. We feel a sense of immediacy of the now. You may think that Dhamma is something out there, something you have to find elsewhere. But Sanditiko Dhamma means that it is imminent, here and now. Akalika Dhamma means that Dhamma is not bound by any time condition. The word akala means timeless. Our conceptual mind can't conceive of anything that is timeless, because our conceptions and perceptions are time-based conditions. But what we can say is that Dhamma is akala, not bound by time. And Dhamma for the laymen or the lay people, Dhamma as ultimate truth, ultimate reality, the ultimate teachings that arise from wisdom, seeing into the nature of reality. And these are Pali words that are descriptive of Dhamma. Ehipasika Dhamma means coming and seeing, turning towards or going to the Dhamma. It means looking, being aware. It is not that we pray to the Dhamma to come or wait for it to tap us on the shoulder. We have to put forth effort. It is like Christ's saying, "Knock on the door and it shall be opened." Ehipasiko means that we have to put forward that effort to turn towards the truth. Opanayiko means leading inwards, towards peace within the mind. Dhamma doesn't take us into fascination, excitement, romance, or adventure, but rather leads to nibbana, to calm, to silence. So many people in the modern Western world, what are they looking for? What do they like? What do we tend to want? We want fascination, excitement, romance, or adventure. If that's what you're looking for, you may want to look another place. Because Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, the teachings from ultimate wisdom leading to the nature of reality, lead to calm and to silence, to peace. They do not take us into fascination, excitement, romance, or adventure. So a lot of spiritual traditions, spiritual teachers, and spiritual, businesses that exist in the world, there's so much presentation of fascination, excitement, romance, adventure, the adventure of astral projection, the adventure of the levels of enlightenment and transcending the nature of self. But Dhamma here means leading inwards, towards peace within the mind. Dhamma leads to nibbana, to calm, to silence. Pachitam veti tabo vinuhi means that we can only know Dhamma through direct experience. It is like the taste of honey. If someone else tastes it, we still don't know its flavor. We may know the chemical formula for honey, or be able to recite all the great poetry ever written about it. But only when we taste it for ourselves do we really know what it is like. It is the same with Dhamma. We have to taste it. We have to know it directly. Taking refuge in Dhamma is taking another safe refuge. It is not taking refuge in philosophy or intellectual concepts, in theories, ideas, doctrines, or beliefs of any sort. It is not taking refuge in a belief in Dhamma, in God, or in some kind of force in outer space, or something beyond or separate, something we have to find later. The descriptions of the Dhamma keep us in the present, in the here and now, unbound by time. Taking refuge is an immediate, imminent reflection in the mind. It is not just repeating Dhammam Saranam Gecchami like a parrot, thinking, Buddhists say this, so I have to say it. We turn towards the Dhamma. We are aware now, taking refuge in the Dhamma now, as an immediate action, an immediate reflection of being the Dhamma, being that very truth. Because our conceiving mind always tends to delude us, it takes us into becoming. We think, I'll practice meditation so that I will become enlightened in the future. I will take the 3 refuges in order to become a Buddhist. I want to become wise. I want to get away from suffering and ignorance and become something else. This is the conceiving mind, the desire mind, the mind that always deludes us. So rather than constantly thinking in terms of becoming something in the future, we take refuge in being Dhamma in the present. Revolution. So let me reread this again, this portion here. Taking refuge in Dhamma is taking another safe refuge. It is not taking refuge in philosophy or intellectual concepts, in theories, ideas, doctrines, or beliefs of any sort. It is not taking refuge in a belief in Dhamma or Buddha or in God, or in some kind of force in outer space, or something beyond or separate, something we have to find later. The descriptions of the Dhamma keep us in the present, in the here and now, unbound by time. Taking refuge is an immediate, imminent reflection in the mind. It is not just repeating Dhammam Saranam Gecchami like a parrot, thinking, Buddhists say this, so I have to say it. We turn towards the Dhamma. We are aware now. Take refuge in the Dhamma now, as an immediate action, an immediate reflection of being the Dhamma, being that very truth. Because our conceiving mind always tends to delude us, it takes us into this idea of becoming. We think, I will practice meditation so that I will become enlightened in the future. I will take the 3 refuges in order to become a Buddhist. I want to become wise. I want to get away from suffering and ignorance and become something else. This is the conceiving mind, the desire mind, the mind that always deludes us. So rather than constantly thinking in terms of becoming something in the future, we take refuge in being Dhamma in the present. The impersonality of the Dhamma bothers many people
because devotional religion tends to personify everything. And people coming from such religions don't feel right if they can't have some sort of personal relationship within a religion. I remember a French Catholic missionary who came to stay in our monastery and practice meditation. He felt at something of a loss with Buddhism because it was like cold surgery. There was no personal relationship with God. One cannot have a personal relationship with Dhamma. One cannot say, love the Dhamma, or the Dhamma loves me. There is no need for that. We only need a personal relationship with something we are not, like our mother, father, husband, or wife, something separate from us. But we don't need to take refuge in mother or father, someone to protect us and love us and say, I love you no matter what you do. Everything is going to be all right, and pat us on the head. The Buddha Dhamma is a very mature refuge. It is a religious practice that is a complete sanity or maturity, in which we no longer seek a mother or father because we don't need to become anything anymore. We no longer need to be loved or protected by anyone. Instead, we can love and protect others, and that is all that is important. We no longer have to ask or demand things from others, whether from other people or even some deity or force that we feel is separate from us and has to be prayed to and asked for guidance. We give up all our attempts to conceive Dhamma as being this or that or anything at all, and let go of our desire to have a personal relationship with the truth. We have to be that truth here and now. Being that truth, taking that refuge, calls for an immediate awakening, for being wise now, being Buddha, being Dhamma, here in the present. So we could say taking refuge is a call to action, as a bringing up, as a beginning. Taking a moment to let those teachings in relation to Dhamma sink in, being the Dhamma. If there are any questions or if someone would like to share something about this portion of the reading in the live chat, welcome to do so. Maybe something to ask for clarification directly about the reading. If there are no questions, perhaps you are being the Dhamma. So, being that truth, taking that refuge, calls for an immediate awakening, for being wise now, being Buddha, being Dhamma in the present. The third refuge is the Sangha, which means a group. Sangha may be the Bhikkhu Sangha, the order of monks, or the Arya Sangha, the group of noble beings, all those who live virtuously, doing good and refraining from evil by bodily action or speech. Here, taking refuge in the Sangha with Sangham Saranam Gecchami means we take refuge in virtue, in that which is good, virtuous, kind, compassionate, and generous. We don't take refuge in those things in our minds that are mean, nasty, cruel, selfish, jealous, hateful, angry. Even though, admittedly, that is what we often tend to do out of heedlessness, out of not reflecting, not being awake, but just reacting to conditions. Let me read that portion again, that short few sentences. So here, taking refuge in the Sangha means we take refuge in virtue, in that which is good, virtuous, skillful, helpful, kind, compassionate, and generous. We do not take refuge, we do not rely upon, we do not go towards for safety those things in our minds that are mean, nasty, cruel, selfish, jealous, hateful, angry. Even though, admittedly, that is what we often tend to do out of heedlessness, out of not reflecting, not being awake, but just reacting to conditions. On the conventional level, taking refuge in the Sangha means doing good and refraining from doing evil by bodily action or speech. All of us have both good thoughts and intentions and bad ones. Sankharas, conditioned phenomena, are like that. Some are good and some aren't. Some are neutral, some are wonderful, and some are nasty. Conditions in the world are changing conditions. We can't just think the best, the most refined thoughts, and feel only the best and the kindest feelings. Both good and bad thoughts and feelings come and go, but we take refuge in virtue rather than in hatred. We take refuge in that in all of us which intends to do good, which is compassionate, kind, and loving towards ourselves and others. So the refuge of Sangha is a very practical refuge for day-to-day living within the human form. In this body, in relation to the bodies of other beings and the physical world we live in, when we take this refuge, we do not act in any way that causes division, disharmony, cruelty, meanness, or unkindness to any living being, including ourselves, our own body and mind. This is being supatipanno, one who practices well. When we are aware and mindful, when we reflect and observe, we begin to see that acting on impulses that are cruel and selfish only brings harm and misery to both ourselves and others. It doesn't take great powers of observation to see that. If you've met any criminals in your life, people who have acted selfishly and wickedly, you'll find them constantly frightened, obsessed, paranoid, suspicious, having to drink a lot, take drugs, keep busy, do all kinds of things because living with themselves is so horrible. 5 minutes alone with themselves without any dope or drink or distraction would seem to them like eternal hell, because the karmic result of evil is so appalling mentally. Even if they're never caught by the police or sent to prison, don't think that they're going to get away with anything. In fact, sometimes it is the kindest thing to put them in prison and punish them. It makes them feel better. I was never a criminal, but I have managed to tell a few lies and do a few mean and nasty things in my lifetime, and the results were always unpleasant. Even today, when I think of those things, the memory is not pleasant. It is not something that I want to go to announce to everybody, not something that I feel joy about when I think of it. So if we fall into that very deep, sustained practice of taking refuge in hatred, anger, greed, harming others, harming ourselves, the situation in our minds becomes quite serious, quite hellish. So in taking refuge in the Sangha, we are taking refuge in doing good. We are taking refuge in avoiding evil, stopping evil. Noticing when anger, greed, negative thinking, judgment, hatred, meanness, nastiness, noticing when it comes up. And rather than falling into it, taking refuge in Sangha, taking refuge in virtue. Moment to moment, not something for us to believe in. When we meditate, we realize that we have to be completely responsible for how we live. In no way can we blame anyone else for anything at all. Before I started to meditate, I used to blame people in society. If only my parents had been completely wise, enlightened arahats, I would be all right. If only the United States of America had a truly wise, compassionate government that never made any mistakes, supported me completely and appreciated me fully. If only my friends were wise and encouraging, and the teachers truly wise, generous, and kind. If everyone around me was perfect, if society was perfect, if the world was wise and perfect, then I wouldn't have any of these problems. But all have failed me. Well, my parents had a few flaws, and they did make a few mistakes. But now when I look back, I think they didn't make very many. When I was looking to blame others and desperately trying to think of my parents' faults, I really had to work at it. My generation was very good at blaming everything on the United States. And that is really easy because the United States makes a lot of mistakes. But when we meditate, we can no longer get away with that kind of lying to ourselves. We suddenly realize that no matter what anyone else has done, or how unjust society might be, or what our parents might have been like, we can in no way spend the rest of our lives blaming anyone else. That is a complete waste of time. We have to accept complete responsibility for our life and live it. Even if we did have miserable parents and were raised in a terrible society with no opportunities, it still doesn't matter. There was no one else to blame for our suffering now but ourselves, our own ignorance, selfishness, and conceit. In the crucifixion of Jesus, we can see a striking example of a man in pain, stripped naked, made fun of, completely humiliated, and then publicly executed in the most horrible, excruciating way, yet without blaming anyone. Forgive them, Lord, they know not what they do. This is a sign of wisdom. It means that even if people are crucifying us, nailing us to the cross, scourging us, humiliating us in every way, it is our aversion, self-pity, pettiness, and selfishness that are the problem, the suffering. It is not even the physical pain that is the suffering. It is the aversion. If Jesus Christ had said, "Curse you for treating me like this," he would have just been another criminal and would have been forgotten a few days later. Reflect on this. because we easily tend to blame others for our suffering. And we can justify that because maybe other people are mistreating us or exploiting us, or don't understand us, or are doing dreadful things to us. We don't deny that, but we make nothing of it anymore. We forgive. We let go of those memories, because taking refuge in the Sangha means doing good here and now, and refraining from doing evil by bodily action and speech. So, you may reflect on this and really see Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha as a refuge. Look on them as opportunities for reflection and consideration. It is not a matter of believing in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, not a faith in concepts, but the using of symbols for mindfulness, for awakening the mind here and now. Being here and now. So, as we have soaked in these nutrients, this rain of wisdom, as we take refuge in the Buddha, the embodiment, wisdom, understanding, awareness here and now, as we take refuge in the Dhamma, living out the practice, being the Dhamma, expressing wisdom here and now, as we take refuge in the Sangha, our willingness, our commitment, our endeavor to do good, to be kind, to be loving, to be patient, to be generous, and to notice, be aware of those unwholesome, negative, suffering thoughts, to let go of them. As we take refuge, let's take a few final minutes together to practice really letting these teachings, letting this wisdom soak in. Not so much putting forth effort or struggling to meditate, but breath by breath, being the Buddha. Being the Dhamma. Being the Sangha. So I invite everyone to join me in meditation, and we can meditate together until once again we hear the sound of the bell. So thank you everyone so much for joining in this community practice. As we finish, I invite you to join me in chanting Sadhu, which is kind of a closing chant and also a recognition of a job well done, of participating in doing good deeds together. So welcome to join me as we chant Sadhu to finish our session together. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right. Job well done, everyone. Thank you for participating and joining in this Sunday group practice. So, I encourage you to move out of your meditative practice, your meditation slowly, gently, mindfully. And for those interested, after about a 5-minute break, we will have a bit of a gathering, meet and greet, open discussion space on the Discord. Okay? So take care, everyone. Be well. And I may see you in a few minutes on the Discord if you'd like to join there. Okay? Thanks, everybody. Buddham saranam gecchami, Dhammam saranam gecchami, Sangham saranam gecchami, Dutiyampi Buddham saranam gecchami, Dutiyampi Dhammam saranam gecchami, Dutiyampi Sangham saranam gecchami, Tatiyampi Buddham saranam gecchami, Tatiyampi Dhammam saranam gecchami, Tatiyampi Sangham saranam gecchami.